On December 26, 1900, a relief ship named the Hesperus cut through the grey winter waters, approaching the Flannan Isles Lighthouse off the remote coast of Scotland. Captain James Harvey felt a knot of unease tighten in his stomach. The lighthouse was dark. It should have been a beacon of safety, but instead it was a silent, unlit tower. No flag was raised to greet them. No one answered their horn or the flare they fired into the sky. Joseph Moore, the relief keeper, rowed to the shore, his sense of dread growing with every pull of the oars. He found the entrance gate closed and the main door locked from the outside. Strange, but not yet terrifying. Unlocking the door, he stepped inside and called out for the three keepers, Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur. His voice just echoed back at him through the cold, empty chambers. What Moore discovered in the next few minutes would become one of history's most enduring and chilling maritime mysteries. The lighthouse was completely deserted. The clocks had stopped. A single chair lay overturned, and on the kitchen table a half-eaten meal sat cold and untouched, as if the men had simply vanished into thin air. The lighthouse itself was in perfect order. The lamps were trimmed, the fuel was full. The last entry in the official log was dated 11 days earlier, on December 15th, noting calm weather. But since then, nothing. 3 experienced men had disappeared from a 150-foot high rock in the middle of the Atlantic, with no way off except by a boat that wasn't missing. Searching the living quarters, Moore found their beds unmade. 2 of the 3 heavy oilskin coats were gone, suggesting 2 men had gone outside into the weather. The 3rd coat was still on its hook, but there were no signs of a struggle, no hint of violence or illness. The only disruption was that single overturned chair. Outside, the western landing platform told a different story. It was mangled. Iron railings were twisted like pretzels. A huge supply box, bolted down, had been ripped from its mud. Boulders weighing several tons had been tossed up the cliff face. It was evidence of a wave of unimaginable power, a force of nature that had smashed into the island with brutal force. But here's where the mystery deepens. The keepers were seasoned professionals. James Ducat, the principal keeper, had over 20 years of experience. Thomas Marshall was known for his meticulous, by-the-book nature. Donald MacArthur, though newer to this specific post, was a veteran of the unforgiving Atlantic coast. These men knew the sea. They would never, ever have ventured onto the western landing during a storm. And yet, something had happened there. Something catastrophic. The Northern Lighthouse Board launched an investigation, but it only raised more questions. The official theory settled on a tragic accident. 2 keepers went to secure equipment during a lull in a storm, were hit by a massive wave, and the 3rd, MacArthur, rushed out without his coat to help only to be swept away with them. It's a plausible story explaining the missing coats and the state of the landing, but it has problems, big problems. Why would men with their experience risk going to the most dangerous part of the island? Why was the lighthouse door and gate closed and locked behind them if it was an emergency? And most unnerving of all, what about the logbook? The entries from the days leading up to their disappearance are bizarre. On December 12th, Marshall wrote of a storm with winds worse than he had ever seen. He wrote that the normally stoic Ducat had been very quiet and that MacArthur had been crying. This was unheard of for these hardened men. The next day, he wrote that they were all praying, feeling the storm was something beyond natural. But here's the twist. Weather records and logs from ships passing nearby show that the weather from December 12th to the 14th was relatively calm. There was no epic, terrifying storm. So, what was Marshall writing about? Was he describing a storm of the mind? Was he using the weather as a metaphor for some other unspoken horror that was unfolding inside that lighthouse? Some have suggested a fight, a murder-suicide, but there's zero evidence of violence, and it goes against everything known about the men's characters. Others point to the supernatural, two local legends of the Isles being cursed. But that ignores the very real physical evidence of destruction on the western landing. A more modern theory points to a rogue wave, a single, monstrous wall of water that can appear out of nowhere, even in relatively calm seas. It could explain the incredible damage and the sudden disappearance of 3 men caught completely off guard. It's a compelling idea, and it's scientifically possible. It could explain why men who thought the sea was safe were suddenly consumed by it. But it doesn't explain the logbook. It doesn't explain the crying, the praying, or the feeling that they were facing something unnatural. It doesn't explain why Marshall wrote on December 15th that the storm was over and all was well, just hours or days before they vanished forever. For over a century, the Flannan Isles mystery has haunted us. Were they victims of a freak wave, a sudden, violent act of nature, or did something else happen on that isolated rock? Did they witness something so terrifying that it broke these experienced men, leading them to make a fatal mistake? The bodies of Thomas Marshall, James Ducat, and Donald MacArthur were never found. All we have is an abandoned lighthouse, a few chilling log entries, and a silence that has lasted for more than 120 years. The lighthouse is automated now, its light still sweeping across the dark Atlantic waters. It stands as a lonely monument to an unsolvable mystery, and a stark reminder that even in our modern world, some questions will never have an answer. Thanks for watching. If you find stories like this as fascinating as I do, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Stay curious and stay safe.